Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashok. It's an exciting time, isn't it, to be in this place, not just in this physical location, but in terms of the intersection of technology and business. I've been around a while, and I remember a previous technology wave known as the internet. Some of us are old enough to remember that. I think AI is a more exciting impact for us and probably the defining technology trend or shift in our generation. And the responsibility and the privilege that we have is to think about how we can apply this technology into our own business context. And there's a lot that I want to be able to say about that. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about the survival of the fastest in that context. And by the way, isn't AI a wonderful tool for us to use to build our presentations with going forwards? The survival of the fastest, I talked about it before as really focusing on the outcomes that we're trying to drive in our business and our ability to maintain and develop our competitive edge, something that capital markets has been focused on for many years. But now we have new ways of applying ourselves to solving those problems. The issue, I think, for all of us is that AI has become so overused as a term and so overhyped, one may say, that it's become difficult to identify where specifically to apply it for best effect. And indeed, it's not that everyone is applying it and getting results. In fact, this study, which was conducted by McKinsey, over 1,300 respondents from a variety of companies in multiple industries, not just in financial services, reflected that actually just 6% were able to derive meaningful value from AI in their businesses today. And by meaningful value, meaning more than 10% of their EBITDA could be attributed to AI. And you can look at that two ways. You could say, well, that's an awful lot of people who are not getting value from AI. If 94% are unable to attribute meaningful value, is AI really going to live up to the promise? On the other hand, we could say 6% may not be a large number, but it's not zero. So what are those 6% doing with AI that's making the difference? Well, first of all, we should acknowledge that Wall Street is not Main Street, and Main Street is not Wall Street, as the Americans would like to say. The fact of the matter is, we do things a little bit differently in capital markets. And having been at the front row of capital markets for the last 30 years, we've got some insight at KX. And today's presentation is really to share with you what we've learned and what we're seeing happening now that I hope will be useful to you as you think about the application of AI into your business. But let's start by acknowledging that in the world of quant trading, which is where we dominate, the rule of twos tends to take effect when it comes to AI, which is to say that decisions must be made too quickly, the data moves too fast, and for Gen AI particularly, the data is too structured. How do we fold in AI, and in that context people generally are referring to generative AI, into the work that we do, highly constrained, highly regulated, compliance orientated? But the reality is that we are starting to see AI secretly seeping into the world of capital markets. And the reason for that is because we're human beings, and human beings focus in their decision-making and our decision-making, unbeknownst to us, because we generally don't think about how we make decisions, but actually two things come into play for decision-making in everyday life. The first is judgment, and the second is prediction. We process information in such a way that we are constantly looking for repeated patterns. We learn by experience. Experience informs us as to what happened last time. And what happened last time makes us aware of what might happen this time. We're constantly making that combination in our minds. We'll come back to that when we talk about neural networks in a moment. But the relevance of AI in this context is this, that AI is starting to take more of the cognitive load off our shoulders in one of these two areas. It's not actually improving our judgment, but it is improving our powers of prediction. And as humans, we are having to adapt to being able to offload that predictive work and then apply our judgment to be able to use it in our everyday decision making. And that is creating a lot of challenges for us. That's not how we were designed to work, but we are starting to see how to take advantage of that. In fact, a study by MIT illustrated that actually applying this predictive capability from generative AI into everyday decision making could make a difference, not only to the speed, but also the accuracy of our decision making. I think what Ashok just said was very interesting. The use of generative AI is not just in its own right, but as an adjunct or an augmentation to what we're already doing. And intelligently combining generative AI with other forms of data processing and decision making is allowing us to do more and go further. In this particular study, the world of professional writers was analyzed by MIT. And they basically encouraged their group of writers, or a group of professional writers, to apply generative AI techniques. And they saw, in all cases, an improvement in both speed and quality of the work. But what was particularly interesting was that the difference that generative AI made was not uniform. And it was the poorest performers who benefited the most. So those writers who were good got better a little bit. The writers who were poor got better a lot, which is fascinating to me because here is a technology that is having a tendency to reduce the variance. And that's a problem if you make your living by generating an edge, which is by definition a variance on what everyone else is doing. So even in our own personal lives, we're being challenged by this. We're being helped by it on the one hand, but it also creates its own challenges. If we then start to take that idea of offloading work of prediction, we then need to consider what is feeding those models. What data is being used to inform those predictions? And how is that relevant in our context? Well, here's an example of a GPT that was developed actually at State Street to look at how to combine structured and unstructured data in a way that would improve the outcomes from their application of generative AI. Take a look at what they found. They saw a threefold, a 300% improvement in accuracy by applying structured data or introducing structured data into their GPT. So here's the before. So the before context. Why did my portfolio decline in value? The answer from the GPT, there could be several reasons. It sounds like my broker. There could be several reasons why your portfolio declined in value. Market volatility, company-specific news, currency fluctuations, and interest rate changes. All perfectly reasonable, not particularly useful. ChatGPT today. However, adding in semantic layer, contextualizing this information using structured data resulted in a slightly modified response. Beyond the generic, we got specific. In your case, you're heavily weighted toward the S&P 500, which declined 6.3% in the last 6 months. Your portfolio declined by just 1.2%. That's good news. Yes, I think we could have worked that out. Your portfolio outperformed the comparable index. The point being that providing context significantly changes the value of the output from our predictive models. Applying structured data is starting to make a difference. You know, when we talk about AI in capital markets, sometimes people behave as if that's a new concept. The reality is we've been applying AI techniques for a long time. This example I want to share with you is actually from Scotiabank. And Judith Gao, who spoke actually at our event last week in New York, was sharing how she has been using machine learning techniques, specifically conformal prediction and causal feature discovery, to improve the way in which she has been able to develop her algorithms. And this idea of using AI as an assistant is what we're all familiar with now with ChatGPT, but we're starting to see ways in which we can make that a reality in our business context as well. One of the most important things about this is the iterative cycle, this idea of being able to test a hypothesis, feed a model, receive the output from that model, evaluate it, and then iterate the next idea. And being able to cycle through that until we reach a point where we have confidence to say, let's now deploy that model into our trading decisions. And then we can work on the next model. We can continue to evaluate and iterate these algorithms. And if you think about it, it's the rate and speed at which we can iterate these ideas that will differentiate our model's accuracy and value relative to what we have been doing previously. So this concept of acceleration of insight is extremely important. Actually, Erin Stanton at Virtue shared this thought in a speech that she gave in an event that we ran last year. And she said this: the activation rate of ideas matters most. And she's absolutely right. Because idea generation is not very valuable unless it sees the light of day, unless it becomes a reality. So our job really is to figure out how we can translate our best ideas into reality in a safe and compliant way while driving a competitive edge for our businesses. One of the ways that Erin shared that she had seen a difference that KX had made for her was the ability to speed up the generation of reports. In fact, she compared life before in her SQL world, where reports were taking 8 hours to generate. With KX, she was able to bring that down to just 5 minutes. And that's the difference between, I'll get back to you tomorrow, and hold on a moment. And that's 100-fold different if you think about that for a second. 8 hours to 5 minutes is 100x. How are you going to use that 100 times more capability? The way that she uses it is to iterate those ideas, to try out 100 different things in the time it used to take to try out one thing. And that's what's generating edge in her business. And she saw the value of that to a degree that she determined that she needed to change the way that she was servicing her own clients, both internal and external. And she conceived of this idea, before it became popular, of AI factory as a service. So if you think about this model here, the ideas on the right-hand side translating into algorithm development on the left-hand side in her AI factory. And I talked to her recently, and I asked her, where do the best ideas come from? She said, almost always the best ideas come from clients directly, because they typically are characterizing problems that they are looking for solutions for, whereas her own team was typically imagining problems and developing solutions and trying to find a way to apply them. So being driven by the client was for her the most effective way to drive her AI factory. But she also recognized that the more people that could contribute to that process, the richer that process would become and the more valuable the outcomes would be. And so this idea of democratizing access is crucial, not just because we want to be able to reduce the demands on the specialists and experts in our own teams. If people can serve themselves, more can be done. But more than that, because more people can then start to contribute to this ideation that will drive innovation. And innovation is really about this activation rate of ideas. So on the left-hand side, we see the algorithm as the output from the AI factory, drawing on all sources of data. And the more complete the data set, the more value that we can derive from the data, the more accurately we can predict the future. On the right-hand side, a wide variety of users now accessing that data, not only through natural language, but also through Python and APIs. And KX underpins this. Without KX, there would be no AI factory as a service for them. And it really stems from these four things. The first is the ability to handle enormous volumes of data performantly. And that data has a temporal aspect to it. And I think that's one of the most crucial things for us to appreciate, that managing and handling time-oriented data is a specialized task that not every technology provider is expert in. We've made it our business from our inception, It's natural to us, and as a result, we're able to handle that in a way that allows for this high velocity algo development. That's what we do. That's what we're really here to enable. And utilizing our cloud partners, we can now express that through multiple forms of deployment to make it accessible and useful. And with Python and SQL and other ways to access that data and to use it effectively, we can provide that complete end-to-end backbone for your AI factory as a service offering. Now, it's famously been said, in this case by one of our hedge fund CEOs, fast and right is better than fastest and wrong. Said differently, speed is not more important than direction. It's vital that we apply this performance in ways that actually result in better outcomes and not more risk. I want to share with you a thought here, which is that as we are talking about AI, artificial intelligence is really attempting to replicate something that exists already, which is human intelligence. In fact, it's trying to not only replicate it, but improve upon it. We shall see if that becomes a reality in our lifetimes. It's impossible to break that, at least from my point of view at the moment. But the way that the human brain works informs us as to how to use artificial intelligence effectively. And if you think about this concept of a neural network, this idea of being able to receive real-time sensory input, to be able to make decisions autonomically, in other words, without having to consciously process that data. We have enough repeated nature that we will automatically make decisions without conscious intervention for the majority of the time. We actually only apply ourselves and our brains to a small percentage of the decisions that we make every day. None of us thought about needing to continue breathing when we enter the room today. We make those decisions autonomically. And we are constantly enhancing and refining the way that we operate. We attempt to get smarter as we get older. All of that led Andreessen Horowitz to make a comment which was at first received with a little bit of skepticism. The assertion that they made was that the most important piece of generative AI architecture is the vector database. Well, why did they say that? What was that really about? It stems from this idea of similarity or anomaly. Being able to identify patterns is really what generative AI has brought to the table. That's something new. The ability to see connections in data and being able to use that then to make a determination as to what's going to happen next. That's really what prediction is all about. And what we've done at KX is to apply that concept of similarity search, and if you think about it for a quick second, the only difference between anomaly detection and similarity search is that one is the opposite of the other. So an anomaly is a dissimilarity. It's an aberration. It's something that's different from what has been seen before. So we can use this same toolkit to allow us to both identify anomalies and to identify patterns that are repeating or similarities. By applying that capability to the world that we all live within, structured, streaming, market data, we can now start to do something really interesting. We can start to identify similarities, not just in text, which was maybe where vector databases started, thinking about unstructured data and how to apply tooling to that. But now we can start to look at market patterns. And being able to do that allows us, with the added dimension of time, to be able to compare in real time what has been seen before in the markets. That starts to improve the way that we think about how we can predict the future and how we can manage risk more effectively. So here's a graph that will look familiar to most of us in the room. Traditional time-oriented market fluctuation data. And here we can see a pattern of anomalies that resulted in the past. Now we can start to apply that in such a way that we can look for what happened next. So let's go back in time. Welcome to your time machine. Let's go back in time. Let's identify when we've seen those anomalies happen before and understand what happened next in the markets as a result. And it's not always the same thing. In fact, here's an example where we're able to look at time slices, in this case of a week at a time. And we can see that in week 1, on the top left, a pattern very similar occurred again in week 11. But what was different was in one case the market bounced up, in the other case it flattened out. Exploring those time windows, being able to delve deeper and applying a full suite of tools is going to enable us to develop responses to that and anticipate that behavior reoccurring in the future with a predetermined outcome that we are in control of. Very different from what we've been able to do in the past. We call this capability temporal IQ. And specifically, we use it for pattern and trend analytics. I encourage you to investigate that further in our demos during the break. So I'll come back to where we started a little bit. It's the idea of accelerating innovation. Ultimately, it's about what gets translated into reality that matters. It's the activation of ideas. That's what we are here to enable for you as our customers. And we do that by focusing in 3 specific ways. The first is to enable you to permit your team, your people, access to the very best in predictive capability to support your businesses. This idea of democratizing AI and making it available to your entire company is what we want to help you with. The second thing is that we have been in this business for 3 decades, specifically focused in capital markets. We have very good presence in this market, and we use that to drive the innovation that we are able to share with you in response. Temporal IQ is a good example of that. The third is that we are focused on what we call extreme efficiency. The reality is we are having to deal with more and faster moving data than we've ever dealt with before. Many traditional technologies are running out of gas. They're simply not able to scale cost effectively. And it's that last piece that really is why we focus on efficiency, because ultimately we need to be able to take advantage of the most data that we can access. We need to be able to make that data available exactly when you need it. So timeliness matters. And we need to be able to do it in a way that is affordable and executable. Even with great partners like NVIDIA and Dell, we're all focused on ensuring that this becomes something that we can make real, that we can sustain, and that we can grow into the future. So those 3 things in combination is really what we think sets KX apart. We believe that KX has a unique approach to the way that we can manage and use data to drive business innovation. And our commitment to you today is to support you on your journey of adopting AI into your business in a safe, predictable, and ultimately effective way. I hope you will make the most of the rest of today and enjoy what is yet to come. Thank you so much.